There's a lot more to food than what meets the fork. But sometimes you have to take things with a grain of salt. Tonight, we'll uncover how food has fueled some of the world's most epic battles. Did frozen dinners cool down World War II? Was the hamburger a weapon of war through the ages? And was the American Civil War an assault over salt? Are they old wives' tales, ancient elixirs, or just clever marketing ploys? Every bite you take has a story, every morsel a myth. Is it baked with fact or flavored with fiction? In the mood for lasagna? Salisbury steak? A bean and cheese burrito? Or how about sesame chicken with fragrant jasmine rice and an Asian vegetable medley? Today, Americans stock their freezers with boxes of gourmet food that take a matter of minutes to heat up. The frozen dinners weren't always so chic, and they weren't always so quick to prepare. Still, these once humble meals may have helped save the world. Did frozen dinners help end World War II? The practice of freezing foods began thousands of years ago in China. As far back as 1000 BC, ice cellars were used to preserve perishable foods. And the ancient Greeks and Romans used airtight vessels packed with snow to keep their victuals vital. But it was modern Americans who made ready-to-eat frozen meals an everyday reality. America's frozen food revolution really began with a wartime food shortage that left our refrigerators empty. Just ask historian Justin Jampol.
In America, World War II was also a war about food. To support the troops, you had to go on a major diet. So basic food items like sugar, butter, and meat were rationed in the early 1940s because they were hard to come by and they were needed on the war front. So in order to prevent price gouging and hoarding, the U.S. Office of Administration froze prices on all everyday items.
But that wasn't all that needed to be frozen. Because of a shortage of metal, especially tin, America's families were forced to empty their cupboards of an old mealtime standby canned food.
The Japanese controlled about 70% of the world's tin supply, and of course we were at war with them. So we were encouraged to conserve and recycle as much metal as possible. Saving cans meant more ammunition for the war effort. The problem is a lot of our food came from cans.
Canned foods were very popular in the 1940s because of their convenience. Out of the can, food was ready to be heated and served. In order to do their part in the war effort, working mothers and busy housewives needed to shake their dependence on canned goods. But what was the alternative? Enter William Maxon's game-changing frozen feasts, packaged in aluminum, not tin. Originally created to serve on commercial and military airplanes, they quickly took off on land.
Maxon was this resourceful entrepreneur from Queens, New York. His idea was to help the war effort and to reduce waste by creating these frozen meals called strato plates. Each meal had a compartment for veggie, potato, and meat.
Other food companies jumped on the bandwagon and began stocking millions of freezers on the home front. Moms embraced the complete, easy-to-prepare meals instead of tin cans. But unlike the frozen dinners of today, these meals weren't instantly zapped in a microwave. That invention was still a couple of years away. Instead, they were heated in a conventional oven for about 25 minutes. It was a win-win for America. Moms fed their hungry families, and our troops got their ammo. And all the canned goods we conserved on the home front were shipped overseas to give our soldiers fuel to fight the good fight. In 1945 and 46, Americans bought 800 million pounds of frozen food. Thanks to William L. Maxon and his timely invention, the way we do family dinners was forever changed.
Over the years, frozen foods have really taken on a life of their own. If you walk down the frozen food section of any grocery store, you'll see international cuisine from beef enchilada to pesto tortellini to chicken tandoori.
The war ended and America celebrated. No more rationing to help the war effort. And our wartime fling with frozen foods turned out to be an enduring romance. Frozen food helped save the day as World War II was raging. But it was a certain iconic American favorite that rallied the troops to begin with. Next, on food, fact or fiction. In the late 1930s, Europe was on the brink of war. The Brits needed our help to defeat the Nazis. But even President Franklin Roosevelt was having a hard time convincing the American people to enter a foreign battle, until he came up with a game plan that, frankly, knocked it right out of the park. The Roosevelts invited the King and Queen of England on a summer picnic and served them hot dogs. The Queen opted for a knife and fork, but King George VI rolled up his sleeves, grabbed that puppy, and dug in. He even asked for seconds. When the American public saw the royals munching ballpark fare, support for the war went through the roof. And when England declared war on Germany 3 months later, America stood by in moral support. Our special relationship had been reaffirmed, maybe thanks to hot dogs. The hamburger. It's an American icon. Not only because it's a tasty meal, it's also a one-handed one. One hand for eating, the other for emailing, driving, and taking selfies. Not all at once, please. But this juicy paragon of Americana was not born in a drive-thru. It was born on the battlefield. In fact, the hamburger evolved through the ages as a weapon of combat. Was the hamburger shaped by war? Genghis Khan commanded a ruthless army of mounted warriors.
Burgers?
And many believe it was on those horses that the burger was born.
You ready?
Burger buff Rev Ciancio is ready to saddle up
You remember your lines?
and explore the horse-driven legend of Genghis Khan and the hamburger.
Genghis Khan is this bloodthirsty warrior, is this giant army. They're marching across grasslands. They have no time to eat. They have no wood for fire, and he inadvertently, in a crisis, creates the hamburger.
Genghis provided his soldiers with steaks, but he refused to let them stop for very long. So, the resourceful troops devised an ingenious cooking method.
But to save time, they used to take the meat and the steaks and they would put them underneath the saddle so that when the warriors were riding, it would tenderize, it would also cook the meat and basically create a hamburger. Then, they're eating their ride and they're saving them much time, they're getting to the battle quicker.
A prophetic glimpse of our drive-through future. But will meat really cook under a horse's saddle?
So we're going to put this in here and try to recreate that.
In theory, the slabs of meat are supposed to break down under the pressure of the saddle and tenderize from the friction.
Let's check it out. Well, it definitely looks like it's been pretty tenderized. You can see it's a little flatter in here. It got some wear and tear.
The Mongol army would vigorously ride for days and days in the blistering heat of the Gobi Desert. And many believe that intense combination could cook any type of meat.
Years later, Genghis Khan's grandson Kublai Khan has taken over the army, but the invasions are still going on, and they're still bringing this meat dish with them. They start to invade Russia, they start to get into Moscow, and the Russians see this dish that they're making, and they sort of adopt it into their own cuisine. They start adding things like raw onions, they start adding spices, they start adding things like chopped chives. What happens? You have a new dish. It's steak tartare.
So where does the name Tartar come from? According to legend, the Russians used to call the Mongols Tartars, and the nickname got minced in with their patties. But how and when does steak tartare transform into the charbroiled burger we love and crave today? The story goes that during the 17th century, German traders brought the Russians' tartare recipe back to Hamburg, a town known for its high-quality beef. But the Germans added a new ingredient: fire.
Hamburg became really well known for these delicious steaks. When the Germans came to America, they brought the recipe with them.
Hamburg steak became a staple on menus all over America by the end of the 19th century. But during World War I, these patties nearly became a casualty of war and almost disappeared from the United States. Next on Food, Fact or Fiction. Find out the truth behind more food myths at cookingchanneltv.com/fact or fiction. What exactly is a burger? Is it just a patty? May seem like splitting hairs, but the breadless Hamburg steak from foreign shores didn't become America's favorite meal until it became a sandwich.
One well done.
Cheeseburger with tomato and onion.
4 cheese works.
New Haven, Connecticut is where the Hamburg steak is said to have received its all-American overhaul.
$20.
According to legend, it was here at Louies Lunch that the first American burger was invented and served.
3 cheese works.
And over 100 years later, the legend abides.
My great-grandfather, Louis Lunch, made the first hamburger sandwich in the United States. It was made here in 1900. He was making steak dinners, and a customer came in that seemed to be in a great rush. Said, you know, if I run that meat through the chopper and put it between 2 slices of bread, I can send him on his way and get him going. Soon then after, he put it right on the menu and took off.
Took off might be a bit of an understatement. This new spin on the Hamburg steak was the perfect recipe for a nation hungry for something different and something we could call our own. Hamburg steaks were quickly replaced by beef on toast, and they picked up the nickname hamburgers.
We have 5 different blends of meat, which is our only secret for making a burger. We cook them in our original antique gas upright broilers from 1898. There's a flame on either side. You just put it between the racks, slide it in, and off you go.
Louies Lunch is known for this family recipe that hasn't changed much over the last century, so don't come in expecting all the bells and whistles.
We put it on toast, plain and simple, with or without cheese and or onion and tomato. Our belief is the less condiments, the better. It should be about the meat and the taste.
America knows a good thing when she tastes it. And for 100+ years, Louies Lunch has been serving up their burgers daily. Hamburgers on toast are one thing, but the American icon we love and crave today is romantically linked with another type of bread. The bun may have saved the burger's life, but it took a war to eventually marry the two. As America fought Germany in World War I, back in the States, anything German was considered unpatriotic. German names were changed. Berlin, Iowa became the town of Lincoln. Sauerkraut became Liberty Cabbage, and the hamburger became Liberty Steak. But changing the name wasn't always enough. The hamburger still reminded Americans of Germany. So we stopped eating beef on toast altogether. The hamburger was on the verge of extinction. That is, until a grill chef in Wichita, Kansas, saved the burger from oblivion by giving the recipe a makeover.
Walter Anderson is a diner. He's thinking, you know, how can I American up this hamburger? So he takes the meat, he shrinks it down a little, he turns it into a square, he gets a heavier bun, it's got some more dough.
The German patty gained an appealing new silhouette and a bun to embrace it. And Americans once again opened their arms, their hearts, and their mouths to the newly naturalized hamburger.
It's no longer a Liberty Steak, it's not a hamburger, this is the first real American hamburger. And of course, America approves.
Anderson quit his job and used his life savings to convert an old trolley car into a diner, which became White Castle, the world's first hamburger chain. And so it was that a fry chef in Kansas saved the burger from becoming a casualty of war. And the rest is delicious history. The hamburger's come a long way since Genghis Khan's butt-burning recipe. From medium rare to well done, from cheeseburgers to truffle burgers, the hamburger is now found in every corner of the world. The only burger battle left to fight today is over who makes the best one. This guy. President Nixon is infamous for government cover-ups. Watergate ring a bell? But have you heard about his messy soup scandal? Next on Food, Fact, or Fiction. We've all heard of Watergate, but has anyone heard of Soupgate? After hosting a fancy state dinner in the White House, Nixon complained that soup simply took too long to eat, and that men don't like to eat it.
No more soup.
He declared war on broth and banished it from future feasts. But then the soup hit the fan. Nixon's chief of staff discovered that the president's suit was covered in soup stains. Rather than admit he was a soup spiller, Tricky Dick covered up his mess with a lie. But the soup ban was eventually overturned, and our presidents have been enjoying it ever since. Salt. Today it's on almost every restaurant and kitchen table in America, and we often eat more of it than we should. But during the Civil War, salt was a commodity worth fighting over. In fact, salt was so important, it's said to have helped decide the fate of America. Did the South lose the Civil War over salt? All ancient civilizations put a high price on salt. Roman soldiers got paid a salarium coin to buy salt, and that's how we got the word salary. Medieval Muslims traded it for gold, ounce for ounce. And in the American Civil War, a battle over salt was waged. This is where that battle went down, Saltville, Virginia, where salt historian Harry Haynes has lived and breathed salt for decades.
During the 1800s, it was calculated that every man, woman, and child physically required a 50-pound bushel of salt per year for survival. The use of salt at that time certainly was to season your foods, to maintain electrolytic balances in your body. Salt was also a primary food preservative and remains so today.
Salt became a necessity of life for Civil War soldiers. No salt meant no meat, and no meat meant a weak army. It also meant no leather for boots, belts, and saddles. Part of the leather-making process required the curing of raw hide with salt. The Saltville Valley was the primary source of salt for the entire South. So if the North could capture or destroy Saltville, they could bring down the Confederacy and win the war.
The salt here in the Saltville Valley is so pure that 1 gallon of heavy brine would produce a couple pounds of salt. And so that enabled producers to manufacture massive amounts.
And that's why the salt here became the most important piece on the Civil War chessboard. Union soldiers tried to attack Saltville twice and failed. But Northern troops did not savor the bitter taste of defeat and came back for more. By cutting off the railroads leading in and out of Saltville, the Union gained a sizable advantage. The battle raged on and on. But without the means to replenish supplies, the Confederates found that time was not on their side.
It wasn't until late in 1864, with the weakened Confederate defenses, that a Union army was able to invade Saltville.
The loss was a blow to the Confederacy, and the South surrendered only a few months later. America's Civil War was over. The battle for Saltville proved a battle well worth its salt. Did the South lose the Civil War over these tiny crystals? The battle over salt wasn't the only reason the North won, but it definitely had a big impact on America's destiny. So the next time your food tastes a little bland, remember, take it with a grain of salt. Destiny. We've separated food fact from food fiction, discovered how frozen dinners fueled the fight in World War II, explored the military history of the hamburger, and learned how a humble table seasoning changed the course of the Civil War. No meal is complete without a spoonful of fact and a dash of fiction.